Bernd, it's a pleasure interviewing you today. We've been following your bank for a number of years. And for those of you that may not know, Saudi Hollandi Bank is primarily, or was primarily a wholesale bank. And then only in 2011 that you made the concerted push to get into the retail side of financial services. And this is quite an ambitious and daunting task that you took on. You had a large number of incumbent players that had a big tranche of the market share altogether. But I think that over the past few years, the hard work that yourself and your team put in has really paid off. It was a good bet to make. Only in this year, the market has recognized you. You've won the Best Retail Bank for Saudi Arabia in 2016, Best Loyalty Program, Best CRM Program, as well as Best SME Customer Service, amongst others. So congratulations.
Thank you.
That's great. I think at the heart of this is innovation and digital innovation that has enabled you to get there. So what I'd like to do today is hopefully get you to spill the secret sauce as much as you can, as much as you're able to. And so, we have a few minutes to ask a few questions before we open it up to the broader audience. So maybe I can get started with, the heart of any good business, its customers. Around the world and in the Middle East and in Saudi Arabia in particular, the young generation are very demanding when it comes to digital and the expectations that they have. They are predominantly on their phone, their lives are spent on the phone, their penetration is huge, almost 200%, and we have a 60% youth population. So how do you find that yourself and your bank are actually keeping up with this pressure?
Thank you, Lutfi. I think you're absolutely right. Mobile phone penetration in the Middle East, especially in the Gulf, is very, very high. Usage of mobile is very high as well. Customers, youthful customers, are very demanding. And as a bank, as any company, you have to make sure you meet their demands. And I think one of the big changes for banks over the past couple of years, and essentially the whole topic of this conference, is the fact that the interaction with customers has changed. It used to be branch-based banking. People came to a branch to do essentially all of their banking business. Today, people come to a branch to open an account. They may come to a branch for a home finance, a mortgage product, but other than that, people don't come to a branch. And to be honest, it's no fun. Nobody goes to a banking branch to have fun, right? So interaction between a bank and its customers these days is all on what we used to call alternative channels, but which essentially have become the main channels. People take their cash from ATMs, they deposit their cash on cash deposit machines, they do their transactions on internet banking as far as possible, and increasingly on mobile apps. One of the choices we've made as Saudi Hollandi is that we want to be the best bank in mobile banking. In the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, we want to be leading in mobile banking. We've invested heavily in our mobile banking app. And I'm very proud to say it's a great app. It compares very well to apps even of big international banks. The key is to keep on focusing on your customer and present your customer with the right service, the right experience. And one of the speakers mentioned it this morning. One of the key elements in that is to make sure that it is truly omni-channel. A customer should be able to start a transaction on one channel, finish it on another channel. And that's an area where banks still have a lot of catch up to do.
User centricity, I think it's easier said than done. Everyone knows it, but actually getting there is difficult. And this brings me to my second question, digital touch points. That's your first touch point with your customer. Saudi Hollandi's mobile banking app is actually quite feature rich. How have you managed to make sure that that feature set is actually the right one for the customers, and how do you actually develop it and prioritize all the features that you want to develop on it?
I think you're absolutely right. User centricity, customer centricity is the name of the game across every product, across every channel. Especially in digital channels, I think getting your user experience right at the design phase is absolutely crucial. So we have a structured way of getting input from our customers and from people that don't bank with us, because in some cases they are the ones that give you even more valuable information. We use that input to come to the right design. We, throughout the development phase, make sure that we stick to what our users are expecting. Testing is always the biggest part of any development, as you know well. But especially in digital, your testing has to be absolutely right. And once you go live, you have to keep on listening to your customers. So we actively look at the social media, what is said about us, what is said about our apps, where we need to improve. We look at feedback given in the Play Store and on the Apple Store as well, because if we want to be on top of the market, then we have to make sure we keep on listening to our customers the whole time. A last point that I want to make is the benchmarking to the other banks, both within the kingdom, within the region, and internationally. If we want to be on top in terms of functionality, in terms of services offered, we have to know what the competition is doing.
It's true, because in the past you used to be able to release a product and sleep for 6 months, for 12 months, take a vacation, because now it's a continuous pace of dynamic improvement.
Customers didn't have a choice, right? You opened a bank account. You typically opened a bank account at a bank where your parents were banking.
Yes.
And then you stayed with that bank for the rest of your life. Yeah. Because moving from one bank to another is or was a very painful process. Yeah. But that's something that has changed as well, right? There's all kinds of directives in the European Union and elsewhere where this has to become portable. You have to be able to move from one bank to another, which means that banks have to fight even harder to retain their customers.
So building the touchpoint, the mobile app, is actually quite almost easy. You can get it relatively easy, but the tough part is actually integrating it into your systems. And I think legacy systems is what scares people. Yeah. You know, how do you actually get this done is a question I think that Saudi Hollandi has been able to do quite well. Maybe you can offer some thoughts on that?
I think when you look at banks are typically old, established, stable institutions. Saudi Hollandi Bank is 90 years old. The bank that I used to work before was established in 1824. If you look at the current JP Morgan and all of its constituent banks, it goes back hundreds of years as well. So banks bring a very heavy legacy infrastructure with them. Many of the big banks are still running on mainframes, are running programs written in COBOL. It's hard to change that, and it's hard to change that, especially if you have 100,000, a million, or 100 million customers. So the challenge for banks is to work around the legacy that is there, because you're not going to change the legacy. So from my perspective, the key thing to do is that you build a layer around your core legacy infrastructure. You make sure that your architecture is a service-oriented one, so that you define things in terms of services, and then you will probably have one or more middleware solutions that sort of shield the legacy architecture, the legacy hardware from the customer touch points. Yeah. If you get your service layer right and you get your middleware right, then your development on the front-facing, on the customer-facing applications should be very easy.
Sure. So, I mean, having done all that effort, you'd think that you're done, but the real next step to benefit from digitization, automation and whatnot is really the processes. Yeah. You know, you have to make everything flow through the organization as a whole, otherwise you've cut it a little short. Maybe some thoughts on that as well?
No, you can get away with it for a short period of time, I believe, with not digitizing your processes. So you can today probably still have handover points in an analog way. A customer starts a transaction on a digital channel, but at some point somebody will print a piece of paper, which is subsequently rekeyed by someone. But that is not a sustainable nor a scalable solution. So you can get away with that perhaps for a brief period of time, definitely not for a longer period of time. So getting your processes digitized, getting them straight through, getting them paperless, that's an absolute challenge. Once you get it right, the good thing about this is that those processes will support your whole bank. Sure. So not just your digital channels, but everything will be supported by these digital processes. And the efficiencies, the streamlining that you can gain by doing this right is very substantial.
I think the challenge always that we find is having someone that's able to actually cut across the organization and not have it an IT project or a retail project or anything of the sort. That, I think, is typically the challenge that you have.
Look, all of these, essentially all of us work for our customers, right? Yes. It's our customers paying our salary. Yeah. And I think one of the things at Hollandi that we keep on focusing on is that everybody in the organization needs to understand that they work for customers.
Sure.
it's easy for the guys in the sales role, it's easy for the guys in the branches to understand they work for customers, but you also want your guy in the payment department to understand that he's working for customers. You even want your people in the compliance department to understand that ultimately they're working for customers.
And risk as well, yeah.
Because if things go wrong with a payment, or if the compliance department does not appreciate the urgency of a certain situation, it's the customer that suffers.
Yeah.
It's a culture change. I by no means would say that we're there yet, but it's something that we very much keep on focusing on. Everybody in the bank, everybody works for the customer.
Sure.
From the lowest clerk in the mailroom to the head of our corporate bank, we all work for our customers.
That's true. So maybe we can switch gears a little and talk about the word of the day, which is fintech. Fintech is all over the place, not just this conference itself, but in Abu Dhabi and Dubai, collaborations are being announced all the time in the world at large. But for banks, fintech is seen as almost a scary word. Disruptors are here to take us over. What was it that they said this morning in one of the speeches? Is that one of the talks is banks are going to become the trusted vault, full stop.
Nothing more.
What's your view on how do you work with fintech and disruption partnerships, or do you just compete against them?
I think what the fintech companies have gotten right is that they understand what the customer wants. Because I think it's wrong to say that fintech companies are changing the banking industry. It's customers that are changing the banking industry. It's customers that want these fintech solutions because they are typically better than what we as banks have been able to provide over the years. So I genuinely believe it's a customer pull rather than a fintech push. It's the customer wanting to have these kind of things. There will, in my opinion, definitely be a role for banks as trusted intermediaries. That will sort of be the minimum role that we're going to play, but hopefully it will be slightly bigger. We have to realize that many of the fintech solutions and many that you see today here are still built on a banking infrastructure. Banking as a utility to the fintechs will definitely also be there. Because there's still a need to provide banking services in terms of payments and cards. But having said all of that, it's clear that our customers are driving the fintech companies to change the industry. And I think the only thing the banks can do is to work with the fintech companies.
Sure.
We shouldn't compete. It's the same group of customers. We should work with fintech companies. We should learn from them, and we should cooperate with them to provide a better solution to our customers. That to me is the key. But it's all about cooperation rather than competition.
I think the fintech companies, as well as regulation, is driving the need for interoperability. Not only to work with the different fintech service providers, but also to work sometimes hand in hand with other banks. What's Saudi Hollandi's bank take on interoperability, and how are you building this into your way forward?
We will follow where our customers go. And again, interoperability, it's the kind of feature that a customer wants. It's good for customers, so we will follow. And I believe customer demands will ultimately be leading anywhere.
Yeah.
You can never compete with your customer demands, right?
Sure.
So we're not going to do that. If interoperability is what our customers want, we will be playing the game.
Very well, very well. And this brings me maybe to my last question before we move on to Q&A, is competition and collaboration. What's the path forward for banks, not only with fintechs, but we spoke about that, but with other banks as well? Where do you draw the line? How do you drive that forward?
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's people in the audience who've been in banking for a long time, but it could well be the worst time ever to be a banker. Sure. If you look at the industry, right? After the financial crisis, banks were rightfully blamed for many things that led to massive regulation.
Sure.
Massive regulation. It's from a compliance and control perspective, banks have become very big companies just focused on doing things right and doing things the right way. So regulation is slowing down the banks, is driving up cost. Competition from existing banks is there because banks have to become more efficient. We carry all these additional costs of regulations. We're competing with other banks carrying the same cost. Then there are the fintech companies which will focus on the space where they can meet customer demands that we are not able to meet in a profitable way. Sure. So ultimately, every fintech solution is there to make money for the fintech company as well, right? So that profit, if it doesn't come from the customer, it will come from the banks. Sure. So that puts further pressure on the banks. I think if you look at Michael Porter's famous 5 forces model of competitive strategy, it's probably the time that there was never a time such as today in terms of competition for the banks. Yeah. We mentioned it before, but banks have to cooperate. Banks have to cooperate with each other in areas where there is no competition for customers. Banks have to cooperate with the fintech companies. If they are better able to meet customer requirements, then work with them to make sure that we retain our customers ultimately, that we keep on being meaningful to our customers, to ourselves, to our staff, to our shareholders. And all of this at the background of increasing cost due to regulation, it's a challenging time. Interesting but challenging.
Very definitely. I think that the regulatory side of things is also needing to take on a more cooperative role, because things are changing so fast that sometimes the regulators need input. They can't just pass it down. They actually need to have a good dialogue between them and the banks lobby upwards alongside the fintech.
You're absolutely right. If a regulator believes that he can stop these developments, I believe they are wrong. Yeah. These developments are driven by genuine customer demands, and these will happen. Sure, you may be able to keep it outside for a little while, but it's not going to last. It's not going to last. It's something that's driven by any development driven by customer demands is going to happen. You can slow it down. You will not be able to stop it.
Thank you very much for this.